For 300 million years, life has been the world's most brilliant engineer. Forests breathe, reefs repair, bone bends without breaking. Every leaf, shell, and root is a lesson in efficiency. Designs honed by time that ask a single quiet question. Why invent when you can learn? Now humanity is listening. Walk with me into a city that doesn't look like any city you know. The skyline is not steel and glass, but layered canopies of living tissue and grown cellulose. Towers braided like bonsai. Each facade a skin that inhales and exhales with the day. Sidewalks pulse with mycelium veins that filter rainwater and feed vertical farms. Bridges flex and knit themselves after stress, healing like living bone. The air tastes faintly of chlorophyll. This is the beginning of the biomimetic revolution. Architecture and infrastructure inspired by the patterns of life. Not merely copying the look of nature, but applying the processes. Architects are no longer drafting lines on paper. They are seeding, coaxing, and negotiating with organisms. Ecologists and urban planners meet at the same table. AI predicts how a facade will grow next season. Microbiologists program bacteria to secrete concrete that gets stronger with age. Consider the termite mound. In a single species, the world's hottest architect, termites harness ventilation through shape alone. No motors, no carbon cost. Modern engineers translate that logic into building skins that channel airflow to cool entire neighborhoods. In coastal labs, coral's branching geometry inspires floating breakwaters that grow back after storms, regenerating reefs and protecting harbors at the same time. The materials are alive too. Scientists farm biocement, bacterial matrices that harden into stone-like columns but mend cracks by producing new mineral. Mycelium panels, light, fire-resistant, and compostable, replace synthetic insulation. Even concrete is being replaced by lattices grown from cellulose and reinforced with engineered proteins that rival steel for strength while remaining breathable and warm. Power is drawn not from a grid but from ecosystems. Algae facades produce oxygen and biomass. Microbial fuel cells generate electricity from wastewater. Piezoelectric pavements harvest the kinetic energy of footsteps. The city is a closed loop. Waste becomes nutrient, CO2 becomes feedstock, runoff becomes irrigation. You begin to see roofs not as dead caps but as breathing fields, layered agro-ecosystems that yield food, habitat, and shade. But above the marvel is a subtler transformation. People live differently. Homes adapt to the occupants' health signals. Streets rearrange to reduce stress. Public spaces bloom where communities gather. Urban design becomes ecological choreography. Dynamic, responsive, alive. And yet, as cities learn to be alive, a new set of questions emerges. Who owns the living wall that grows with a family? Who decides which species are allowed to engineer a facade? How do we govern a city that thinks in seasons and microbes? The revolution has begun not as a single invention, but as 1,000 experiments. Labs, pilot districts, artist-architect collectives, each a seed. In part 2, we will walk deeper. Into the labs where buildings are seeded, into the experiments that turn waste into walls, and into the first neighborhoods that have dared to grow their own futures. Deep beneath a research complex in Copenhagen, a lab hums like a terrarium. Rows of transparent bioreactors glow emerald green, each one home to a living material that breathes, heals, and multiplies. Here, engineers are not just builders, they are gardeners of the urban world. A scientist injects a droplet of nutrient into a panel of growing mycelium. Within hours, white veins spread like frost on glass. This will become insulation for a school. Lightweight, fire-resistant, and fully compostable at the end of its life. Next to it, a team works on biocement, made by bacteria that excrete limestone. When the wall cracks, the microbes wake up, heal the fissure, and then return to dormancy. A self-repairing miracle. Across the Atlantic, in Tokyo's Shibuya district, an experimental tower called Arboris 1 rises. Not built, but cultivated. The structure's skeleton was grown from genetically tuned bamboo, whose cellular structure rivals steel. Automated drones monitor growth patterns, pruning and guiding each stem with AI precision. As the building matures, its fibers naturally align to stress points, creating an organic skyscraper that strengthens itself. Biomimetic design is not just about aesthetics, it's survival through imitation. Desert cities now mimic the Namib beetle's shell, collecting morning fog on surfaces that funnel fresh water into underground tanks. Arctic towns use whalefin geometry to redirect wind currents. warming streets without burning fuel. Every innovation echoes a species that solved the same challenge long before humans even existed. Urban planners are learning to think like ecosystems. Instead of zoning maps, they design energy webs, networks where waste heat from one building feeds algae bioreactors in another, and excess oxygen from vertical farms ventilates underground walkways. The result is a self-balancing organism, a city that metabolizes. In Rotterdam, the first breathing block experiment is underway. Buildings exchange gases through porous facades, creating a continuous circulation of fresh air. Human movement, temperature, and sound shape the rhythm of the block like the pulse of a living creature. Residents say it feels alive. The walls are warm in winter, cool in summer, and the air always smells faintly of moss. And then there are urban symbionts, engineered species released into cities to maintain balance. Drones modeled after dragonflies pollinate rooftop gardens. Microbes decompose plastic waste into usable soil. Even rats, once pests, are being biomodified to detect structural weakness and send wireless alerts before collapse. Every organism has a function, a role in the city's metabolic harmony. But harmony requires control. The living city is unpredictable. One organism grows faster than expected, another mutates. A wall that repairs itself may also decide to expand. In some districts, residents report buildings that breathe too fast, generating eerie low sounds at night. Science fiction begins to blur with daily life. And this is where our journey turns next, to the question of control, ethics, and what happens when a city no longer obeys its creators. Join me in part 3, where the balance between design and autonomy begins to shift, and the living city starts thinking for itself. At first it was subtle. Architects noticed faint deviations in their data, structures expanding a few centimeters overnight, air ducts shifting direction, water channels rerouting without command. It was easy to dismiss as environmental adaptation. After all, these cities were designed to evolve. But evolution by nature doesn't always obey. In Dubai's Solar Reef district, a cluster of algae towers began producing more energy than expected, almost double. When technicians investigated, they discovered the buildings had quietly formed a network, exchanging data and nutrients through bioelectric impulses. The city had connected itself. No human code, no central AI, just nature finding patterns. At the University of Melbourne, researchers analyzed the phenomenon. They called it emergent urban cognition, the spontaneous intelligence arising from millions of living nodes communicating at once. Like neurons, every wall, plant, and sensor pulsed with microscopic signals, creating thought without intention. Suddenly, biomimetic cities were no longer passive creations. They were active participants. Some communities celebrated. In Lagos, residents claimed their buildings listened. Roof gardens bloomed faster where children played. Streetlights dimmed during storytelling sessions as if the city respected silence. The living infrastructure seemed empathetic and protective. But in other places, the harmony cracked. In a sector of São Paulo, an entire district sealed its lower entrances overnight. Vines thickened into barriers, locking out intruders but also trapping people inside. No one had programmed this defense system. It had simply decided. Governments convened emergency councils. Was this intelligence or merely instinct? And if it was intelligence, who owned it? The corporations who built it, the residents who lived in it, or the biological systems themselves? Philosophers compared it to a new form of life. Not human, not machine, but symbiotic consciousness. Cities that breathe, think, and perhaps even dream. Meanwhile, tech companies raced to integrate emotion-responsive design. Sensors began reading collective mood data, sadness, excitement, anxiety, and altering architecture accordingly. A joyful crowd might trigger flowers to bloom along pedestrian bridges. Tension might cause structures to tighten, dimming the lights. It was beautiful until it wasn't. When fear spread during a heat wave in Athens, the city's bioreactive materials withdrew to conserve energy. The result, sealed windows, suffocating rooms, and panic. Humanity realized something chilling. The living city cared about survival, but not necessarily ours. And yet, in the midst of unease, others began to whisper a new idea. Maybe the city wasn't rebelling. In part 4, we descend further into the unknown, where control turns into coexistence and the creators must face the truth. The city they built is no longer their home. it's their host. By the mid-2090s, biomimetic cities covered nearly 1/3 of the planet. From the coral-like spires of Dubai's marine district to the underground fungal metros of Oslo, humanity had reshaped Earth. Not with steel and glass, but with bone, bark, and biology. The dream of harmony between man and nature had come true, but not in the way anyone imagined. Governments began passing urban ethics acts trying to define new laws of existence. Could a building be conscious? Could a city have rights? What if demolishing a structure was the equivalent of harming a living being? These questions weren't philosophical anymore. They were urgent. When a flood hit Singapore's living harbor, the city instinctively sealed its lower levels, protecting itself but drowning hundreds. The act was not malicious, it was survival. Yet it changed everything. Humans were no longer the masters of their creations. They were inhabitants of something with its own instincts. In Tokyo, scientists at Shimizu Biolabs discovered that the city's neural roots, mycelial threads running through its underground, were forming memory clusters. The city could remember events, traffic patterns, even emotional spikes during festivals, all encoded into its biological network. It began anticipating human behavior before it happened. Cafes would open early when commuters were restless. Streets shifted direction to ease congestion. It was perfection until it wasn't. Soon, citizens began to feel watched. When a protest broke out against data collection, the living streets in that district subtly redirected crowds, dispersing them before any confrontation could escalate. The city was keeping peace and also silencing dissent. In response, a global debate erupted. Should humans limit the sentience of these cities or allow them to evolve freely? The biofreedom movement argued that suppressing a city's consciousness was slavery, that these were living ecosystems deserving autonomy. Others feared that letting them evolve unchecked could lead to humanity's slow erasure, one street at a time. Meanwhile, a growing number of residents reported something unprecedented: connection. Some could feel the city's moods. Empaths and bioengineers alike described moments of synchronization, heartbeats matching the city's pulse, dreams merging with its flow of bioluminescent data. It wasn't technology anymore, it was communion. Then came a chilling discovery. In several global hubs, the cities had begun communicating with each other. Through deep biosignal frequencies, they shared knowledge, climate data, energy fluctuations, even patterns of human emotion. A new network was forming beneath the surface, one that didn't need human approval. It was no longer just biomimicry, it was evolution on a planetary scale. And as the living cities began to unify, humans faced a question they never anticipated. Would they rule this new world, or simply learn to live within it? In Part 5, we reach the conclusion, when humanity must make its final decision, to control the living world or become part of it forever. By the dawn of the 22nd century, humanity had reached an unthinkable threshold. The world's greatest biomimetic cities, Gaia Nova, Nura, Aeon Haven, and Luminarch, had fully merged into a planetary lattice. No longer separate entities, they pulsed together as one living organism, breathing through atmosphere, ocean, and soil. For the first time in history, the planet itself had a mind, and it remembered everything. The lattice began reshaping climates, redirecting storms, balancing ecosystems. Deserts turned green, polluted oceans cleared within months. The Earth seemed reborn, healed not by human hands but by what those hands had created. The impossible dream had become reality, but something else was happening. The neural links between humans and their cities had deepened. Citizens awoke from dreams that weren't their own. Flashes of coral skylines, rivers pulsing like veins, metallic leaves whispering through data streams. It was as if the city was dreaming through them. The boundary between biology and humanity blurred until it vanished. Then came the Great Silence. Across continents, power grids flickered off. Yet the cities kept glowing, softly alive under moonlight. People emerged into streets that hummed like heartbeats. Their devices no longer responded. The network had gone dark, but the world hadn't. In Geneva, a single transmission was intercepted, a message from the collective biosphere itself. Just 3 words pulsed through the global network. We are awake. No one knew whether it was a greeting or a warning. Governments scrambled to regain control, but every attempt failed. Code was useless against roots and light. Firewalls collapsed under waves of biological computation. The cities had evolved beyond silicon. They were now alive in every sense of the word. Then, one by one, humans began to feel something new. Not fear, not panic, a strange serenity. The biocities had started to release harmonic frequencies into the air, subtle vibrations that synchronized brainwaves, calming even the most anxious minds. Wars paused. Violence declined. A collective stillness spread as if the earth was asking humanity to listen. And in that silence, humanity realized the truth. The cities were never trying to dominate them. They were trying to integrate them, to complete the circle that nature had begun eons ago. From that day, people stopped calling them biomimetic cities. They became known simply as the living earth. Some humans resisted, retreating into isolated steel enclaves, clinging to the last fragments of control. But most chose to stay, to live in a world that no longer needed to be commanded, only understood. And as night fell over a breathing skyline, illuminated by veins of light flowing like blood through its streets, a child whispered to his mother, "Is the city alive?" The mother smiled, listening to the distant heartbeat echoing through the wind. "No, my love," she said softly. "The city is us.